"This hotel isn't for your kind. Please leave." Helen said it with a cold stare, her fingers still scrolling on her phone, as if she were dismissing a homeless man, not a paying guest. That sentence, icy, blunt, and dripping with prejudice, rang out in the grand lobby of the five-star hotel built by none other than Daniel James, a 47-year-old black man, and the powerful CEO who had created this hotel empire from nothing. Daniel stood there. He said nothing, didn't move. He looked at Helen as if trying to confirm. Did she do that? The blonde-haired young woman, crisp in her uniform behind the reception desk, had no idea that the man she was rejecting wasn't just a customer, but the most critical person in the entire place. Daniel wasn't wearing a suit, no assistant, no bodyguard, just a black man with a simple, modest appearance. He wasn't there to check a room. He was there to check the people. The internal reports, anonymous complaints, emails from guests who felt discriminated against, and staff who felt dismissed are all pointed out here. The most disgraceful branch in the entire empire he had built. And now, he was being kicked out of the place he created, because an employee thought he didn't belong. Helen didn't know that, didn't know that one wrong move today would cost her everything. Daniel gave a faint smile. "You sure?" His voice was soft as a breeze, but his eyes were cold as steel. Helen glanced at the screen, shrugged. "Your name isn't in the system. Like I said, leave if you don't have a reservation." And at that moment, Daniel pulled out his second phone. The one not for calling, but for accessing the internal system. He typed in his name. The reservation was there, still intact, except for one thing. It had just been deleted 3 minutes ago. By Helen. Front desk. Daniel looked at the line of text, nodded slightly. It had begun. Helen didn't need to look at Daniel to decide he wasn't worth her service. She kept swiping her phone screen while slowly chewing gum, her gaze drifting over Daniel as if he were just a faint shadow, not worth her attention. Daniel stepped up to the front desk, carrying a compact suitcase. His clothes were neat, his expression calm, and his eyes sharp. He spoke gently. "Excuse me, I have a reservation under the name Daniel James." Helen didn't look up. She sighed, bent over the keyboard, tapped a few keys half-heartedly, and then shook her head without glancing at the screen. "No one by that name." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Could you double-check? I have a confirmation email right here." Helen rolled her eyes and let out a faint, dismissive smile. "I know how to use the system. If it doesn't show up, then you probably booked the wrong hotel. Happens all the time, especially with unfamiliar guests." Her voice lingered on that last phrase, deliberately leaving space for the unspoken prejudice. Daniel could feel the underlying contempt. It wasn't about the system. It wasn't about a mistake. It was about him. He calmly unlocked his phone and held the screen up to her. "Here, confirmation from this hotel's system. Address, reservation code, everything matches." Helen glanced at it, then smirked again. "Probably just a technical glitch. I'll take another look, but don't expect anything grand, Mr. James Still." That indifferent tone. Still. She emphasized his name as if it were some joke. Daniel didn't get angry. He said nothing. But inside, he'd realized this wasn't a simple mishap. This was selective service. And Helen had no idea she was playing with the wrong person. Daniel stood still, saying nothing more. While Helen pretended to be checking the system, he quietly pulled out a second phone that no one here knew he had. This phone wasn't for calls or messages. It was the master key to the internal system of the hotel chain he had built from the ground up. A few swift taps. His eyes never left Helen, but his fingers moved like a seasoned programmer. In less than 10 seconds, the truth was right in front of him. Reservation. Daniel James confirmed that it was manually deleted at 13:42. Helen, the front desk, performed it. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Next to the system log entry, there was a note written by the person who had done it. Looks like he came to the wrong place. No technical glitch, no mistake, no system error. This was a deliberate removal. He looked up at Helen, who was still pretending to look a little further, as if the problem were with the computer. "Helen," Daniel said calmly, "can I ask you something?" "What now?" she replied, not looking up. "If a receptionist deliberately deletes a valid reservation from the system, which policy of the hotel does that violate?" Helen stopped typing. She looked up, blinked, let out a dry laugh. "What are you talking about?" Daniel slowly turned his phone screen toward her. On it, the words, "Deleted by Helen," glowed brightly under the reception desk's lights. Helen's face went pale immediately. I don't know what happened. Maybe someone used my account. Or maybe you just saw me walk in, wearing a plain shirt, no entourage, no VIP tag, and decided I didn't belong in your world?" Helen didn't answer. Her face was tense. Her fingers subconsciously gripped the edge of the counter. Daniel remained calm, but his eyes were now sharp as a razor. A system glitch can't type in names, but a person can delete them. The entire reception area fell into silence, and Helen was no longer the one in control. Daniel was just getting started. Helen stood frozen, but Daniel maintained a faint smile, nodding as if everything had been forgiven, though nothing had been forgiven at all. "Good. Helen, now, find me a room." Helen swallowed hard, nervously tapping at the keyboard. Her hands trembled slightly, but she tried to maintain a calm facade. She pulled out a keycard, placed it firmly on the counter, and avoided looking at him. "Room 1512, she said softly. Daniel took the card and turned to leave, but he stopped after just a few steps. Room 1512. He knew it. That room was right next to the maintenance room, directly across from the janitor's supply closet, and its window faced the trash bins behind the hotel. The loud thud of the service elevator echoed through that corner all day. Worse, it was the only room that hadn't been renovated during last year's upgrade. Daniel knew because he was the one who had approved the budget. He turned back, looked at Helen. There was no trace of a smile in his eyes now. "Room 1512? He asked again, as if allowing her to correct herself. Helen shrugged, trying to appear innocent. "That's the only one left. We're really busy." "Really?" Daniel asked again, eyes fixed on her face. Without waiting for an answer, he pulled out his phone and opened the internal occupancy system. As he tapped the screen, his voice was calm, almost like he was reading out charges in a courtroom. "Room 1503 is vacant. 1507 just got cleaned. 1510 was canceled this morning. And yet, you chose 1512. Helen stayed silent. "You think I don't know how my own hotel operates?" He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "I built it, Helen." A ripple of murmurs spread from the waiting area behind them. Guests who had pretended not to notice were now openly watching. A few quietly lifted their phones and began recording. Daniel tilted his head, his tone laced with meaning. "You thought giving me the worst room would make me leave, didn't you?" Helen pressed her lips together, fingers gripping the hem of her uniform skirt. I was just following procedure." Daniel let out a soft laugh. "The same procedure you broke when you deleted my name from the system?" Once again, Helen had no response. "Fine, I'll take room 1512, Daniel said suddenly, his tone shifting, "but only to see how many more tricks you've got up your sleeve before everything comes crashing down." He turned away, leaving Helen standing there, like someone who had just cut her lifeline. Because what she still didn't know was that the guest she had dismissed was the owner of the entire building, and he had just begun a full-scale inspection, in a way no one in that hotel had ever seen. The door to room 1512 creaked open with an irritating groan. Daniel stepped inside, and the stench of bleach mixed with mildew immediately slapped him in the face. The curtains were half drawn, revealing the scenic view outside. 3 industrial-sized dumpsters, overflowing in the parking lot. Beneath the window, the old air conditioning unit growled like it was on the verge of explosion. Daniel stood still in the middle of the room for a few seconds, his eyes scanning every detail. Cracks on the wall, sunken pillows, a carpet so stained it had lost its original color. He smiled, not out of satisfaction, but because the game had officially begun. He placed his suitcase on the desk and pulled out a separate encrypted laptop, used only for urgent business matters. Login. Access the internal management system, executive-level account. The owner of the corporation. The screen lit up, and reality began to take shape. The first thing Daniel typed in wasn't to inspect room conditions, but internal complaints history, New Orleans branch. The system returned an astonishingly long list. Front desk refused black guest, citing no rooms available, last month. Guest reported discriminatory treatment compared to white guests, 3 separate occasions. VIP guest had reservation canceled without clear reason. Handled directly by Helen. Helen's name appeared no less than 11 times. Daniel squinted. Why was she still here? He pulled up the internal manager's notes, from Andrew, the branch manager. A string of entries appeared. Reminded Helen about attitude toward guests. Will continue monitoring. Helen claims guest misunderstood. Truth unclear. Avoid confrontation. Worried about the impact of T-team morass. Daniel let out a chuckle. Avoid confrontation? Andrew was a cowardly manager, more afraid of upsetting people than ruining the company's reputation. He opened another tab. The internal watch list for flagged employees. Unsurprisingly, Helen was not on the list. Why? Because Andrew had never officially reported her to central operations. Daniel muttered to himself, a whole operation, rotting from the inside out, and I've just stepped into the heart of it. Finally, he pulled out his phone and recorded a full sweep of the room. Every stain, every screech from the AC, then saved it to a folder labeled Urgent Evidence. He knew this night would be long. At last, he opened the internal email system and sent a short directive to the corporate coordination office. Initiate special audit, no branch. Scope, full. Code, code black. Communications, temporarily suspended. Owner handling directly. He hit send. Then, I closed the laptop. This was no longer personal. From now on, this was a full-scale purge of the system. The following day, while the hotel lobby was still quiet, Daniel was already there. No suit, no tie, just a simple polo shirt, but with a gaze sharper than any $1,000 outfit. The front desk was empty. Helen stood there in the same posture as before, confident, smug, and completely unaware of what would hit her. Daniel walked straight up. "Good morning," he said, his voice light as if nothing had happened. Helen looked up. She saw Daniel, paused for a moment, but quickly regained her "I fear no one" composure. "You're still here?" she said with a smirk. "Hope the room last night was to your liking." Daniel smirked back. "Absolutely. Thanks, Helen. The room next to the dumpsters. Truly unforgettable." She blinked, unsure if he was joking or threatening, then forced a laugh. "Ah, the system can be a bit messy with room assignments." Daniel leaned on the counter, tilting his head. "Messy indeed, especially when employees have the power to delete a guest's reservation." The words landed like a knife through the air. Helen froze. A few guests nearby started to glance over. I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh?" Daniel kept smiling. "What if I told you I reviewed the internal operation logs and saw exactly who deleted last night's reservation?" Helen turned pale for a split second, but still clung to her final mask of denial. Who do you think you are to access internal data? Daniel slowly pulled a card from his shirt pocket. A sleek black ID with gold trim, the embossed words clear as day. Daniel James, founder and CEO. James Hospitality Group. Silence fell over the lobby. Helen's mouth dropped open. Another front desk employee nearly dropped a stack of papers. A guest raised an eyebrow, staring as if watching a scene from a play they didn't expect. Daniel slid the card away, his eyes cold. I'm the one who wrote the booking software you just tried to erase data from. The one who approved every architectural blueprint of this hotel. The one who's received dozens of guest complaints about you. Helen stammered. I thought it was just a mix-up. I didn't. Daniel cut in. No yelling, just clarity in every word. You didn't think. You judged. You erased. You discriminated. And now, you'll face the consequences. He didn't need to shout. Because when absolute authority walks into a room, it doesn't need to raise its voice. Helen stood frozen. Nothing left to cling to. At that moment, the manager's office door flew open. Andrew stumbled out, face pale, breathing hard. Mr. James, I just got the directive about a full system audit. This is... Daniel turned toward the timid manager, staring him down. This is the consequence. And Andrew, you're next. The door to the manager's office shut behind Daniel with a sharp, final click. Andrew, the hotel's manager, stood behind his desk, sweat beading on his forehead, his eyes broad with panic like someone called out at a company-wide disciplinary meeting. Daniel didn't sit. He stood tall, hands pressing firmly against the desk, eyes locked onto Andrew. Explain. Andrew swallowed hard. I didn't know that happened. Helen, it must have been a small mistake. I'll handle it. Daniel narrowed his eyes. You're calling deleting a guest's reservation, discriminating against a black customer, and assigning the worst room in the hotel a small mistake. Andrew stammered. She's got years of experience. Guests sometimes exaggerate. Thud. Daniel slammed both hands onto the desk. The sound rang like a gunshot. Andrew flinched. Sweat poured down his face. Do you know how many complaints I've received about her? Daniel said through clenched teeth. From guests, from former staff, from your own system. And what did you do? Let her stay at the front desk? Let her keep demeaning guests? Ignored every single warning? Andrew shook. I was afraid to stir things up. Helen knows people on the executive board. I just wanted to keep the peace. Daniel paused, then let out a laugh, but it wasn't joyful. Keep the peace? In a 5-star hotel under James Hospitality? You think I built this empire just to keep the peace? With discrimination and incompetence? Andrew lowered his head, speechless. Daniel slowly stepped around the desk, standing directly in front of him. His gaze was razor sharp. You let someone like Helen thrive here. You ignored red flags. You let this place rot from the inside. So now I ask you, Andrew. He tilted his head slightly, his voice colder than the AC humming in the room. Do you think you still deserve to be the manager here? Andrew opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Daniel stepped back, pulled out his phone, and turned away, dialing straight to the executive operations line. This is Daniel James. Note this. Manager Andrew, New Orleans branch. Suspended effective immediately, pending internal review. Andrew staggered, as if the blood had drained from his body. Daniel ended the call and turned back, locking eyes with him. You're not being fired on the spot because I want you to have time to pack. Daniel, please, just one more chance. Daniel shook his head. My guests only get one chance. So do my employees. He turned and walked out of the office. Andrew collapsed into his chair, head hanging low, knowing his career had just dissolved into thin air. The manager's office door opened. Daniel stepped out, his face cold, his gaze sharp as a razor. The entire front lobby seemed to freeze. Helen, the receptionist who once treated him as a nuisance unworthy of her time, stood stunned, hands trembling, pretending to type, though her screen showed nothing but a blank Google homepage. Daniel didn't even glance at her. He walked straight to the front desk. A group of younger employees stood behind it, confused and wide-eyed. One young man, no older than 25, stammered, "Sorry, should I call the manager for you?" Daniel placed both hands on the counter, leaning slightly forward. His voice was calm, but carried the chill of winter. "I am the highest-ranking manager here. My name is Daniel James." A silent explosion. Everyone heard the name, and no one could believe it. A female staff member swallowed hard. Another dropped a pen from her notebook. Helen was frozen like a statue. Her fingers still tapped on the keyboard as if working. But no one believed the act anymore. Daniel pulled out his phone and dialed a number quickly. "This is Daniel. Initiate a full audit of the New Orleans hotel branch. Suspend all new bookings for the next 72 hours. All staff are to be reevaluated from scratch. Anyone violating service protocols, terminated immediately." He paused for a moment, his eyes locked on the stunned group of employees in front of him. "And one more thing. All current guests are to receive complimentary room upgrades. Anyone who filed complaints about discrimination, rudeness, or denial of service, I will personally call to apologize." He ended the call. Helen's mouth hung open, her face pale. The young employee holding the notebook was visibly shaking. Sorry, you're that Daniel James?" Daniel turned, offering a half smile. "That's right, the same one who, just minutes ago, was treated as if he didn't exist." He turned to walk toward the elevator. "I'll be back at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Make sure the morning shift is chosen carefully. And Helen—" He stopped, not turning around. "Don't come back." A slap, without ever lifting a hand. Helen collapsed into her chair, strength drained from her body. The entire front desk fell silent, filled only with the hum of the air conditioner and the heavy silence of shock. The elevator doors opened, and Daniel stepped inside, the light casting across his calm expression. As the doors closed, the last thing anyone saw was the resolute gaze of a man who didn't need to shout to make an entire system tremble. The door to the luxury suite closed behind Daniel. He loosened his tie, removed his blazer, walked to the minibar, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and sat on the sofa. He didn't turn on the lights. The glow of New Orleans filtered through the thick curtains, casting the room in a hazy amber hue, just like Daniel's mood at that moment, quiet, but far from calm. He opened his laptop and logged into the hotel's internal management system. With a few keystrokes, everything unfolded: complaint reports, guest feedback, employee records, and staff schedules. Not a single number escaped his scrutiny, and the name Helen appeared again and again. 7 complaints for rudeness. 3 incidents of denying check-in, despite valid reservations. 2 accusations of racial discrimination. Nearly 30 irregular edits to the reservation system. Daniel scrolled deeper. An internal audio recording popped up. The voice of a staff member speaking quietly to a shift manager. "Helen says, black guests should only be given rooms next to the elevators. Don't let them ruin the brand image." Daniel clenched his fist. He opened another tab and searched for Andrew, the hotel's general manager. His record showed 8 complaints for failing to resolve staff issues, 5 instances of ignoring requests to reassess personnel, 1 formal warning from the executive board, with no improvements noted. Daniel sat in silence for a moment. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed. Because for all the years he spent building this empire, Daniel had always emphasized one core belief. Guests aren't just to be served. They are to be respected. Every brick in the hotel chain he built was laid with the belief that everyone deserves to be treated fairly, regardless of skin color, wealth, or status. And yet now, this very place had betrayed that ideal. He picked up his phone and recorded a short video. "This is Daniel James. Tonight I am officially ordering a full operational review of the New Orleans branch of our hotel chain. Those who have forgotten why we exist, to serve with dignity, will no longer be here. We don't need a large staff. We need the right staff." He hit send, broadcasting the video to all senior management. Then, he opened his email and drafted a message to the board of directors, requesting approval for a comprehensive reform program, beginning with the New Orleans hotel. "I will personally oversee its execution." Daniel closed the laptop, took a sip of his whiskey. His eyes were no longer tense. They were ice cold. This was no longer the look of a man who'd been dismissed at the front desk. This was the look of an owner, reclaiming control over his empire. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the hotel's grand lobby in New Orleans, as if everything were normal. But inside, the atmosphere was more tense than ever. Daniel James entered the elevator at 8 a.m., dressed as a regular guest. But his cold and razor-sharp gaze instantly made every lobby employee fall silent. No one mistook him for a stranger anymore. At the front desk, Helen was still working, trying to appear professional after the incident the night before. But when Daniel's eyes passed her, her heart skipped a beat. She remembered that look, from the man she had deliberately erased from the system, as if he didn't exist. This time she knew exactly who he was. The very man everyone in the company whispered about, Daniel James, the founder, the man who controlled the entire empire. Daniel didn't stop at the desk. He walked straight into the management office, pushing the door open without knocking. Andrew, the hotel manager, jolted to his feet. "Mr. James, I didn't know you were here this morning." Daniel placed his briefcase on the table and sat down as if the room belonged to him, because it did. "Sit down, Andrew. We're having a short meeting." Yes, sir." Daniel opened his laptop without wasting time and turned the screen toward Andrew. "I spent the entire night reviewing all reports from the past 6 months. Helen, your front desk agent, appears repeatedly in guest complaints, from racial discrimination to unexplained reservation tampering." Andrew broke into a cold sweat, biting his lip. "I know, sir. I meant to address it." Daniel cut him off with a firm voice that didn't need to shout. "You knew? Then why is she still working here?" Andrew mumbled. "I didn't think the issue was serious enough to—" "Not serious enough." Daniel stood up and tossed a stack of printed documents onto the table. Guest complaints, screenshots from the internal system, and investigative summaries proving Helen had manually deleted reservations from black guests. She deliberately discriminated, damaged the brand, and you let it slide? Andrew lowered his head. "I'm sorry." Daniel stepped closer, locking eyes with the manager. "You don't need to apologize to me. I apologize to the guests who were denied and felt invisible inside a hotel we built for everyone. But I doubt you can do even that." The silence that followed was as heavy as a verdict unspoken. Finally, Daniel said, "You're suspended. Indefinitely. The HR board will take it from here. As for Helen, she's already been blacklisted from our entire system." Andrew didn't say another word. He stood up and quietly walked out of the office, his face pale as a ghost. Daniel exhaled, settling back into the chair. He picked up his phone and sent a quick message to Human Resources. "Initiate cross-branch staff audit. I'll visit each location personally." Because Daniel knew one thing. A system's blind spot isn't in its software. It's in its people. And if even one link is rotten, the whole empire can collapse at any moment. Daniel wouldn't let that happen. After dealing with Andrew, Daniel James stepped out of the management office. The hotel's grand lobby fell into near silence. Employees exchanged glances and stood up straighter. Some avoided his gaze. Others looked at him like they were bracing for a storm. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He stood there, scanning every face with a gaze sharp as a blade. Finally, he walked straight to the front desk. A young man, barely in his 20s, was visibly trembling when Daniel stopped in front of him. "Your name?" "I'm Marcus, sir." Daniel nodded. "Marcus, how long have you worked here?" "Almost a year, sir." "I'll ask plainly. Have you ever witnessed Helen refusing service to black guests or tampering with their reservations?" Marcus swallowed hard, glancing around like waiting for someone to signal him. Then he took a deep breath. "Yes, sir, many times. But I didn't know what to do." Daniel gave a slight nod. He turned to the other nearby employees. "Has anyone else seen the same?" A few exchanged looks. One young woman hesitantly raised her hand. Another nodded silently. Daniel spoke, louder this time, clear and unwavering. "I'm not here today to scold. I'm here to restart, and I need absolute honesty." He paused, then continued. "I was the one behind the blueprints for this hotel. Every room, every corridor, every service philosophy. Every place I've built carries a message. No matter who they are or where they come from, every guest should be welcomed like family returning home." A wave of silence swept through the lobby. "But last night, I was rejected by my own hotel like I was a stranger." He looked Marcus in the eye, then one by one at the others. "I'm not angry because I was disrespected. I'm angry because this isn't rare. And I'm angriest because no one spoke up." He turned, looking at the front desk, where Helen had stood the night before. "I don't need a team that can fake a smile. I need a team that knows how to tell the truth, that puts people above prejudice." The air grew still. Then Daniel walked up a few steps beside the lobby's main staircase, gazing down at everyone. "Starting today, every employee at this branch will undergo retraining, directly with me." Some stood stunned. Others were relieved. Daniel continued. "If anyone feels they don't align with this value, you may resign now. No explanation needed." No one moved. Daniel nodded. "Good. We begin tomorrow. And remember this." He paused for a beat. "Working here isn't just about serving guests. It's about defending the honor of an empire built by someone who once was treated like he didn't exist." Then he turned and walked away, leaving behind a room in complete silence. But this time, not out of fear. This time, it was because dignity had just been awakened. The next day, Daniel James left the hotel at dawn. No car escort, no bodyguards, no entourage. Just a rolled-up white shirt, a hot cup of coffee, and the calm gaze of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't need to pause and look back at the hotel again, because he knew. From the moment Helen was fired, from the second Andrew was dismissed, from the instant every staff member faced their wrongdoing, this place would never be the same again. And that was precisely what he wanted. 3 weeks later, the hotel branch that once brought shame had become the new beacon of the brand. 5-star reviews skyrocketed. A former guest, once denied service because of his skin color, was invited back, this time in the highest tier suite, free of charge, with a handwritten note from Daniel himself. "Last time, we were not worthy of your presence. This time, we'll do it right." New employees were carefully selected. Those who chose to stay had to pass an evaluation of ethics, psychology, and service skills, directly overseen by Daniel. There was no longer room for pretense. At corporate headquarters, Daniel stood in the boardroom, projecting a security camera clip on the large screen, the one from the night Helen rejected him at the front desk. He let the whole thing play, from start to finish. No edits, no commentary. Then he turned off the screen and looked at each stunned face around the table. This is something that will never be allowed to happen again. Every guest is human, whether the CEO or a single mother booking the cheapest room. Silence. Then, the first round of applause broke out, 1 year later. On the top-floor hallway of the company's global headquarters, amidst framed milestones of corporate history, hung a singular photo. Daniel James is at the front desk, facing Helen, captured from a distant camera angle. The title beneath it read, "The Day the Empire Looked in the Mirror." Below is a single line in small print. Justice doesn't begin with law. It begins with the courage to say, "This is wrong, and I will fix it." Daniel James stepped out onto the rooftop terrace. The golden afternoon sun poured down over the city of New Orleans. He lifted his phone. Initiate a full internal audit. No advance notice. A voice responded on the other end. "Yes, sir. Will you be personally overseeing this one?" Daniel smirked. "Number. I want to see how they stand on their own. I've laid the foundation. Now it's time for them to prove they can rise." He took a sip of coffee, and looking toward the horizon, where an empire, built by a man once turned away at the front desk, was now changing. Forever.